Appreciate it. And on behalf of the county and our staff at the city, we appreciate your involvement today and yesterday. When one of the ideas I had when I came up with the notion of bringing you all together was, in terms of the TAC, there's been a lot of work done in the past year, and the result of it may not have been disseminated very well through the community. And so my idea was that if we're going to move forward on these recommendations and make improvement on our system, there needs to be a sense that the community has a role in that. And how can we have a process that doesn't feel so top down and more bottom up, more organic, more related to the community's input as well. And so when we had our conversations yesterday and after the facilitators gathered to talk about what transpired, it occurred to us that there is a process in group dynamics, and many of you are familiar with the idea of like the norming and storming and forming. Well, we're actually doing that as we speak. And so in order for us to have a sense that the recommendations of the TAC are moving forward on a community level, there's work that we need to do together. And so some of you might have heard things yesterday and said things and felt a sense of perhaps disconnect. And I think what I'm wanting us to consider is that's par for the course. You should feel that sense of where do I stand? How does this all work together? How can we all come together? So that's a quote unquote normal aspect of group and community process. I also, throughout the morning, and maybe you had this experience too, I heard things that in the moment they struck me in a certain way, and I didn't feel comfortable with it, but in that moment didn't have the right opportunity to really unpack that with folks. So I think there's, oops, I just died. No, I didn't, I'm here. So I'm hoping that this morning around tables we can do a little bit of that unpacking. And so we've actually changed the agenda for the day, and I'm going to walk you through that in a response to helping us as a community to develop that sense of group purpose and vision and cohesion. So today's agenda, where we're going to do this recap together around small groups. We're going to have this icebreaker activity called community building or building community. That's the reason you have these index cards on your table, so don't write on them quite yet. That's going to take us all the way to our break at 10:30, the stretch break, for about 5 minutes or so. And then we're going to move in to do a little bit deeper exploration of the TAC recommendations. And some of the feedback that we got from yesterday was, boy, that TAC stuff seems really like bureaucratic and technical and like it's missing the mark. So we hear that, and we also think if we have a little bit of time on a surface level to examine those, there is work that we can do together later in the day that will help us create that message or messages that will be useful to folks in the room and also our larger community. So after our break, we'll take a brief look at the TAC recommendations, and then we're going to have you all self-select into working groups around 8 different topics, most of them related to the recommendations, but also we want to give space for other groups that feel like you all want to have a deeper conversation on an issue that hasn't been raised. And we'll present that to you later. And we'll work on those in those small groups and then report out at the end of our time together. And we'll close around 2:30, 3 o'clock. All right? So that's essentially our agenda for today. So what I want you to do in your small groups, there's 2 questions that I'd like you to answer. And if you find that you're at a table where there's less than 3 people, move to a table where you've got at least 3, 4 folks who are sitting, so you can have a diverse perspectives, all right? So there's 2 questions, and let me move them here. If you can see that. So I'd like each person in the group to go around the table and to share, first, what were your takeaways? What did you get out of yesterday? And I'd encourage you to speak not only from your head, but also speak from that emotional center too. What did that leave you feeling? But also, what kind of rational cognitive thoughts did you walk away with after hearing the discussions yesterday? So that's the first part, takeaways. And the second is about expectations. So given what we went through yesterday, what we heard, what do you expect that we can do today? What are you hoping that we might be able to accomplish? So we're going to give you a good 15 minutes to have that conversation. Yes, if you're sitting at a table with less than 3 people, find a place where there's... We're going to go around to each table. I'm just going to have one person give a brief summary of what were some of the takeaways from yesterday and expectations. So do we have a spokesperson from your table, Alex?
Oh my gosh.
Just to get a minute.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so here's what we have. This is Heather Saleeki's wonderful idea, which is we create a pilot project. It starts in the cities of Eugene. So every ward in Eugene gets a certain amount of money to increase their housing and shelter units, and then the wards are competing against each other to create more housing or shelter units, and they determine how they want to do that, and we get private investors who will do matching dollars so you can fundraise for your ward, or if you don't want something in your ward, you can donate to another ward so that they can do more things in their neighborhood, and you earn badges for different things that you do, such as building an ADA unit or a pet-friendly unit. What are the other badges? Oh, you build an economic opportunity for people. That's our idea. Thank you.
So they went straight to their expectation. That's fine. That's fine. How about over here?
Way to go.
Takeaways.
Hello, I'm Travis with Homes for Good. So our takeaways yesterday were everybody's on the same page. We want tangible goals. We all want to move forward with things. Our expectations today is really make those action steps. Some discussion that we had was over the overregulation and I guess administrative burden of the data piece with the money that comes from the county for these programs for folks that are using those dollars, specifically HMIS and Service Point, that those dollars coming into agencies don't cover the administrative burden for staff, so it doesn't make sense for those agencies to take that money. Lastly, what was our last piece? Contracts, making sure the county, when you're contracting with smaller agencies, that money's there or it's not there, and we're communicating proactively with folks. Several people at our table mentioned our contracts with the county may or may not exist, we don't know, and our agencies are going out on a limb waiting to know if that money's going to be there.
Thank you. How about table 8?
Hello. Our table talked about transparency, talking about having the real conversations, whether it's about money, lived experience, efficacy, or even buy-in into the system. Housing First isn't for everybody. Housing First is for some people. We have to really meet where we are. We have to be honest. We have to really engage with everybody. Okay.
All right. Well, some of the takeaways, though there were a lot more, was we had somebody that was a presenter at our table here, Lisa, that felt that the might have needed a do-over. There seemed to be, what'd you say, the idea that you were maybe defending yourselves, or?
No, it's good. Sorry.
Well, let's put it more succinctly.
Yeah. I have not had as much coffee as Richard. That we perhaps did not share with the group that we are very willing and we're at the place where we do want to improve our system. So when we were sharing about what the system is today, it is just about what the system is today.
And we found that the diversity of people here was very enlightening. I particularly like that idea that there's a bunch of people that don't see things the way I do, and vice versa, and I think that's great. We found that there was not as much actionable solutions as wanted to be, but we're not there yet. We were doing a lot of QI and 5Y and all that good stuff, and seriously, you guys think about that. While we're doing QI and 5Y, somebody might have just froze to death on the street. So let's think about that seriously for a minute. That's not a joke. But also what's not a joke, we found out, is funding issues. A lot of the presenters, including yourself, Bob, and I heard this from a county commissioner the other day, say, the funding issues kind of stop at us from the county. There's no help from the federal agencies or even from the state to really step up to the plate, so the buck stops at Lane County. And yeah, there was just not enough information given on issues. There was a lot of, we don't know, that's a great question, I'll get back to you on that, and that kind of thing. And I don't think any of us are here to listen to those political type of answers. So
I do have to comment, Richard, on one piece. There is funding. No, it's good. There's good. There is funding at the federal, state, and local level. Our challenge is what? There's not enough of it, right? And we've seen, I like to say, we've seen for the last 40 years, these last 4 decades, further deterioration of that funding that supports that social safety net. So, and the challenge is for at the local level, we're at the bottom of that stream. And so,
we move at the Thorazine shuffle pace where other municipalities such as Houston, Salt Lake, that you mentioned, and other places are housing. These people are homeless. Let's get them housing.
yeah, I hear you. And there are reasons for that slow pace, and the communities are different. There's no question about that. Do you have somebody who's your spokesperson? Are you? Okay.
All right. So takeaways, large disconnect between administration funding and boots on the ground. Nothing was really new or surprising, and not quite sure how we felt about that. Learning more about the county statistics and their limitations. More discussion needed on root causes and goals and clarity. Not dealing with need for more housing itself for poor people. Expectations that the county officials have an understanding of the actual work, kind of related to number 1 on the other side. Maybe regulations would look different, maybe funding and metrics would look different. Need for more conversations and coordination between all the stakeholders, including unhoused folks, especially in Springfield, Eugene. There is some of that starting to happen, apparently, and that is happening in Cottage Grove. Questions about what will be the outcome of this meeting. The TAC gives hope to some of the rural providers for innovation. The question of funding and public awareness. If we're going to need more funding, especially in the local area, how do we get the public to support that? And then feelings were frustration because of lack of funding and not being able to meet the needs, and hope for the TAC recommendation.
Very good. Thank you. And really nice writing, too. How about at this table? Do we have a spokesperson here?
Hi, David Hazen, ECAN, Emerald Compassionate Action Network. I think we all agreed that yesterday was very daunting on a feeling level, that we started out with feelings of connection and ended up with feelings of hopelessness, really. It was pretty bad. At least it was for me personally, but we all shared in that. And I'm really proud of the people at my table who came back today with fresh energy to let's get going. And some doubt that even one day is enough to really accomplish something. I want to go on and on, Bob.
I know it's going to be challenging. We're going
Yeah.
to hang on to that, David.
Yeah. Okay, but I just want to point out personally that I see that lack of funding, lack of property, places to put people is not the problem. The problem is a broken community that is not communicating horizontally. Your NIMBYs are going to stop anything government does. Your NIMBYs are your problem.
I think a lot of us agree with that statement. How about this table? Do we have a spokesperson?
So we talked about some similar things to other groups. We had some differences of perspective on yesterday. Some feeling that some really good connections were made with others, and some hopefulness around that, and that there's a general common vision about making a difference on this issue, and some movement on raising consciousness around it. But also some frustration that there continues to be a lot of talk and not a lot of action, and hoping that we can move more towards that today. So I think generally there's a feeling that connections are important, listening is important, and some good things happened on that front yesterday, but we have to start moving towards more actionable things. So, and a feeling that people are in different places in terms of their level of knowledge on this issue, and so that was just revealing yesterday. And so some who feel like they've been in a lot of these conversations are more on that frustration and patient end, and then some who feel like they're new to the conversation feel like information is helpful and these connections are helpful. So, but continuing to bring people together and make those connections is going to lead the way.
Can I say one thing, Reagan? Yeah. I just want to say one thing that was a little frustrating for me yesterday is that when Bob was up here and announcing that, oh, we're glad Emily Simple is here and this person is here and this person is here, I think that maybe we should say, we're really glad you're here. Like, where'd you sleep last night? Out in the streets, and you're still here. Like, that is huge. That is absolutely necessary, because these are the people that are going to tell us what they need. And what I'm hearing is, we need a van for emergencies to bring sleeping bags to people. Or I'm incontinent, I'm on the street, it's cold, it's freezing, and my pants are wet. Who am I gonna call? Oh, this emergency vehicle that's running around with regular grassroots citizens. It doesn't need to be funded by the county. It just needs to be done. And this is how we're gonna start this movement. And you, right there with the red beard, I'm really glad you're here. It's hard to be here amongst all these housed people. I'm making an assumption that you are unhoused, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong with that, but thank you for being here and being willing to be vulnerable in front of all of these people, because that's important.
Got this table, and then we're going to go back. Table 3?
We, in general, really appreciated getting to hear the different voices yesterday. And we are a little distressed that we lost our person who is representing the business community. And we hope that wasn't a general pattern, because we wanted to hear all voices, you know. There was frustration at a lack of actionable items coming from the meeting. There was distress at hearing how many people return to the system after getting housing. That was a statistic that was pretty painful to think about, and a discussion of possible ways that could be helped in terms of monitoring people after they get housing. That maybe could be a productive conversation.
Thank you. And I think, is there just one more table left? Is that right? Okay.
Bob, I have my timer set here. And we'll hear music after 1 minute, and I will maybe shut up. No, I will. Actually, I'm a little bit different perspective. I'm at a table with Martha, who is very vocal and has some great ideas. I'm at a table with Suzanne with Shelter Care, with the head of Human Services, Steve Manella, and so I'm not going to talk about some of the things that we're talking about at the other table. I'm going to talk about the continuum that we stand in. I'm listening to Martha with wonderful ideas. Yesterday I listened to Simone with wonderful ideas and Jan with wonderful ideas. I talked to Mike yesterday with wonderful ideas. I hear all of this, and we're in a position where we have to translate that to people who aren't here today. We're here because we want to be here. We take the information knowing what we need. I've been hearing what Martha says for a lot of time, a long, long time, and she's still saying it, and we're all still saying it. These things need to be done. I hear the things, I translate them to people who need to hear them, and what we need is for those people to hear. Now, I use an example of Food for Lane County. Food for Lane County, it's easy to describe what hunger is. Consequently, it's really easy to get on board with the solutions for hunger. It's not easy to describe to people in Bethel what 10 homeless boys look like when they're going to school. They think they're going to steal their bikes. So this is the conversation we have to have. We have to hear what Martha has to say, and the people in service need to be able to translate that to the people who are going to have to let it happen in their neighborhood. Because right now, no matter how much money you have, you can't site a facility. So that's the discussion we have to have. We have to move things down the road in that direction. And I've got 17 seconds. I have pictures of my grandchildren.
Thank you. So often in the work of bringing communities together, there's this notion of both preaching to the choir. I definitely feel there's some of that. That's been a part of our deliberations. There's also the part about organizing the choir, right? So I think the folks in this room, we're part of that choir, and we have this harmony of parts that we're trying to congeal together. This next activity we're going to do, to me, is informed by the notion that our words are so inadequate. They really are. To describe at a deep level the human experience, to capture the vision that we're trying to project for our community. So this next activity, for the most part, is done in silence. And so I'll give you the instructions to do this. And I also hear the real intention and desire for action. This is a group of people. Y'all are doers. Y'all are doers. Also doers, they also need time to reflect and to have space for that vision. So this next activity, although it does include some doing, I also want you to think and be here in that metaphorical space, and you'll see what that looks like in just a moment. All right, so pay attention in this activity more to that. I guess there's a part of the brain that's more intuitive. That's the part of the brain that we're engaging in this next process. All right, so this is all in silence, and you'll notice you have some supplies at your table. They're actually index cards. We're going to be using those. If there's a table that's next to you that has some index cards and no people, grab some of those index cards off those tables, and we'll bring some more around to you. The first part of this activity, you'll need to get up and you'll need to connect the tables so that they're touching each other, at least the tables where you're sitting at. That's fine. This is good. That's fine, just like that. All right. Now, around your table, you're going to work with your team, and on your table, you're going to use the cards, the index cards, to create the tallest tower possible. But you can only use these cards, and you can only fold them hamburger bun style, if that makes sense. The hamburger style versus the hot dog style that would be like long, right? So hamburger style. In silence, you can't use any other materials. You have to work with your team at your table to create the tallest tower possible. Let's do this in silence. In silence. Go ahead. each other, ourselves. Yes?
Words get in the way.
Yeah.
We accomplish more as a team when we were silent than when we were having conversations.
Yeah, something about our communication, the words can get in the way. Anything else? Richard?
I found that everybody's more equal and all has to kind of pull together. There's no facilitator, there's no leader, everybody kind of catches on to the same idea. And you'll notice there's different ways of making these towers. Some look like tents, some look like towers. Might have a little office there.
Yes.
It's just, everybody kind of followed as a whole, the group, instead of somebody saying, yes, we're doing this, even in silence. Some just hold up a card and everybody pulled.
Right.
Worked as a group, so there was no ego.
Yes.
Big thing to get out of the way.
Martha?
Suzanne mentioned that it took trust,
Mm.
the people that you were working with. You had to trust. And Pat said some people are builders. That's a role I just find intuitively. So I told them some people are builders. Let them.
Mm-hmm.
Let them do it.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. I'm going to come back to Wayne. How about somebody on this side of the room? I want to hear from this side of the room.
Well, it's interesting, one woman whose name I don't know didn't give up.
Ah,
After you called quits, she was still connected.
there you go.
And they waited until she got this line hooked in.
Yes.
And showed us how she did this miraculous thing coming down the side.
Yeah.
Of their table, which is pretty cool.
Very cool. Very innovative. Yes. How about in the front here, from this section? Anybody, any comments about what the silence taught us?
Well, it's consensus building, so our group decided to shift the direction, which I thought was not a good idea, but I couldn't say anything. So I was pretty much forced to go along and do consensus, and I liked that. I thought
Okay.
that was very good.
Yes. Wayne?
Yeah, I felt a shift in the way my body was functioning without the use of our facial organs, except our eyes. It gave a little more presence to the rest of my body. I could actually feel my hands talking and feet. It's just a greater sensation of the whole person when you're not only using a couple of organs at a time,
Yeah.
especially the noisy ones.
And then that last question, I'd like to hear about what were the roles that you ended up playing? Can folks talk a little bit about that? What role did you find yourself playing in this activity? Go ahead, Chris.
Started off as a team player, and then when I saw things picking up, I stepped back and let other people lead.
Yeah. Others, yes?
Whenever I saw a hole or something that looked like it needed to be taken care of or whatever, I would just do that piece right there. I was kind of watching for those types of things to occur.
Yes. Yes. What other roles did you play?
Jump in and start.
Jump in and start. Yes.
Support person, so somebody else is lead.
Yes. I saw one person, they were just folding cards. And they were just
I felt
feeding
that I was
them.
more manufacturing. I'll just sit here and, okay, we're folding cards, I can do that. And so I just started folding cards and handing them to people, just sitting around there, and someone else was doing other work. So I just kind of realized that my role at that moment was, we need cards, we need to build the tower, so I'll fold cards.
Yeah. Any other roles that you might have played?
Well, I'm in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
So he's tall and can stand up. So I had to find a role I could do with my limitations of not being able to stand up. So I fell, I folded.
Yes.
And he kept handing the cards, and she kept handing the cards so the person standing up could be the builder. So we had to find different roles so we would get all the tasks done.
Yes. Yes. Work with you. I'm glad Commissioner Farr is tall, I feel better now. Yes.
And also because our table was kind of squished in here, we didn't have it all the way around easily. I remember I did have to step back at one point and let Risa get involved because she could, there was, one of us had to move so she could help, so she could be part of it.
Yes. Cheryl.
We had to learn how to function as a team, suffering a few setbacks. We were very resilient and just recycling our materials and rebuilding. I thought that was great fun to rebuild.
Yes. Speaking of fun, I saw a lot of smiles and a lot of just real energy, just this positive energy while you all were doing that activity. There was a playfulness that came out in folks that I thought was wonderful. So, we've talked about how our words oftentimes get in the way, and this activity is a metaphor, right, for community. We're trying to create something, build something, represents diversity. Let's talk a little bit about this metaphor. How is this metaphor, how is this activity a metaphor for what we're trying to accomplish in the complex nature of what we're going about? You should have from yesterday's packet, okay, it's actually the third page that has the executive summary. A couple of weeks ago, we gathered service providers, and we kind of went through this activity. So if you were there for that day, this may be a little bit of a rehash. But essentially what I want you to do is to take a look at those recommendations. This is the brief summary. The full report, as you may know, is online. There's a link to that full report. And some of you may have even participated in the process in focus groups or other work that was done to gather community feedback. So after you in your group have a chance to relook at that summary, we're going to ask 3 questions of your group. What makes sense? What makes sense? What's missing? And then the last piece is what are opportunities that we have to move this forward? Folks have been saying, what are we going to do? We want to see some results. This is part of that. So this is where we start getting to work in terms of practical things we can move forward. So let's take time. I'm going to give you a few minutes, and then when your group is ready, I'd like you to respond to these questions. You can use we're just going to go through all 3 parts. Mike is our speaker.
Give it a stab, Bob. So our group liked, what made sense to us was the outreach components, the training components, the coordination and encouragement of more communication. What was missing or what could change? More shared trainings. In general, greater investment at the county level to be able to provide greater training, coordination, direction, and leadership to all service providers in the county to help us to standardize some of our measurements, provide shared trainings for all agencies that we're currently investing in individually. That would help us have more shared language as a collaborative, more shared experience, and therefore more shared values as a collaborative, and help us to build a good tower. That's it.
I'm gonna keep your notes there. Can I do that? So we're gonna keep these for posterity. And there. All right. Let's go to table 1. Okay.
So we thought, I think there was general consensus that the TAC report makes a lot of sense. The 10 recommendations are good and helpful. We spent a lot of time talking about what's missing and trying to kind of turn that into the opportunities there, I think. Just a general quick overview of some of the things that are missing. It's too technical. It leaves out what we can do now in the immediate, how to get the money and how to find sites to do some of the items, really identifying some of the barriers for things like diversion, mental health and addiction support. And then we really, I think, started going deep into some ideas and opportunities that I think generally focused on public education and awareness, and a way to maybe not wait completely for that to manifest itself before starting to do things, maybe doing things on a small scale that can help build some of that public education and trust. Getting people involved in matching local resources that people have in their neighborhoods with opportunities that they may be willing to try. So kind of just from what I heard about a lot of the ideas, it's just taking opportunities that may exist and matching that with the resources and the local willingness to do something and try something. Is there anything else that?
You want to pass it to the next table?
We talked a lot about, thank you, you can hold that. So our group also felt like the recommendations overall made a lot of sense. We talked about a shelter making a lot of sense, but we had some concern about it only being 75 people. It definitely makes sense that we need to include the landlord partners and they need to be involved, and then the permanent housing is key. And then we also had a lot about what's missing. It's a smaller list. So not enough shelter beds. We talked about the decriminalization piece being missing and being very important and something that we can do immediately. And we also talked a lot about the community involvement. So if we don't address the NIMBY, doing outreach, doing advocacy, and doing media support, then we won't get the bigger community involved. I don't remember what that was. We also talked about zoning, building codes, urban growth boundary limits, and land reform. So things that are really local that weren't part of the TAC recommendations that have a really big impact on the housing that we're able to provide. And that it had a scarcity focus, so better utilization of our current resources and assets and strengths and contributions, and better utilization of what we have in our community, rather than just focusing on where we're lacking in resources. Anything else that I'm missing there? We need more of a plan for more affordable housing outside of our homeless service system, and a variety of housing that meets everybody's needs. And then we talked a lot about opportunities, using the TAC recommendations as a time for more community involvement and conversation, a really good opportunity to question our assumptions and our hidden assumptions. And it's a good time to get out of the norm and make a lot of changes. And so really a time to switch it up and just get rid of what doesn't work and recognize what is a strength and what's working. A good time for more inclusive services and removing silos and getting out of this analysis paralysis and taking action. And then more transparency and accountability. So it's a good opportunity for us to really share what we're doing and be transparent about that and have accountability in making sure we're getting results. And it's also a good time to process the grief and recognize really how hard this issue is and how it affects us, and being able to acknowledge those feelings openly and process that together as a community. Is that it? Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to pass this over, and I'm going to can I take your...
I need to read it. Can't remember. What makes sense, we talked about the coordinated outreach, especially to the street, expansion of permanent supported housing availability, the tenancy supports, and training landlords, et cetera. And number 8, which is also, I think, related to landlords. What's missing, funding mechanisms and ideas, the needs of rural areas, lack of units to meet needs, how to change community attitudes, and then the role of the possibility of home ownership for poor folks. And opportunities, we came up with mostly the education idea, education of public, of needs and experiences of being unhoused, and education of the community of how the homeless system works and is not working and why. In other words, help the community understand the TAC report, basically. Is that right? And then a safe place to sleep emphasis.
I'll have you bring it to the next table while I grab this.
Over here, you can do this. We'll bring up the sheet. We'll bring those. You just speak.
Okay, so what makes sense? We're going to be kind of repetitive here. More resources across the system, improvements to coordinated entry, treat it as an integrated system, prevention, landlord partnership coordination, accountability from landlords and programs, and I don't know what this means, plan baseline to reference.
It's something that can be referenced as a plan.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So it's great to start with a plan, but it's a start.
Right.
Right.
What is missing?
And what is missing? What is missing is how do we measure success? What does the audit and oversight of this look like? Also identifying specific populations within the single adult population. For example, single women, young adults, seniors, and people with disabilities. Lack of capacity, outputs on the navigation map, funding overall. What's missing is also a sense of urgency. Identifying who does what. Policy, other overreaching policy choices that may impact our success. Identifying current strengths and policies. Cost-effective prevention strategies by supporting families and youth was missing. And it lacks messaging directed to the business community and others outside of this world. And then opportunities are community engagement tailored to different sectors. For example, creating a dog and pony show for the business community. Engagement to landlords, with landlords. So doing a better job explaining some of the landlord protections that are available, and explaining how we're providing services to our tenants to make them housing ready, and to help them become great tenants that would be more attractive to landlords. Another opportunity is we have a great opportunity within our community to demonstrate effective solutions and best practices. Setting an example. Most agencies are willing to participate in quality improvement, and we have an opportunity to examine and re-examine our priorities. And education, policy, and hope. So that's an opportunity with this TAC report, is to provide more education around policies to the greater community and provide more hope that there is a solution to this problem. Can you pass that?
So trying not to duplicate what makes sense, the whole damn thing. And missing, well, also, I want to also speak out about training of the navigators and the outreach workers. It's hard work, requires significant skills, and training and ongoing training is going to be important for that group of people. What's missing, building more housing is really missing, but it's not part of the report, but it's a huge piece. We need a day center, and we second everything else that was said, I think, also. We had a good time with opportunities. You know, that's a place for creativity. One was we need to better use existing resources in a more coordinated manner. We need to address NIMBYism. We would like to have a formal business community ask for help and support. Report out successes and quick wins, so publicize, and incentivize innovation. So those were some of the opportunities we see in the TAC report.
You got it.
So all of it makes sense, but there's no information on how to fund it. So we're just talking about what we should do, just like this exercise that we're currently doing. Let's read about what we should do and then talk about what we should do, but that's not going to help us get where we need to go. So I mean, I think we know all of the opportunities and all of the things that are missing in this report. I just think we need to stop talking about it. Or if we are going to talk about it, let's tackle each individual thing separately. Let's talk about how we're currently doing it and how we can improve it. I just don't think this is very useful.
Okay, our group felt like all of the TAC recommendations make sense. One of the pieces that we talked about was that there's a need to implement all of the parts of the report, that you can't just do one. And there's a mix of things included in the report that need to either be improved, expanded, or created. So it really addresses the fact that we have a void in our ability to do what we need to do in order to house everybody who wants to be housed. What's missing? We talked about it in that we need to be able to communicate in terms that people will listen and people understand, and that we need to rewrite something that talks about what this all talks about, that doesn't talk about it in technical terms, because we're not going to help people get on board if they don't understand. And we had some concrete examples of, just for the person out in the community, well, how do you access services if all of a sudden you find out that you're not going to be housed, and how can you do that very efficiently and over the phone, rather than making an appointment or some of those other things. So there were recommendations in the TAC report around phased assessment and improvements to coordinated entry, but coordinated entry doesn't mean anything to someone if somebody knows that if I need housing or I have a problem with my housing, I call this number. That makes more sense to people. We also, some of the other groups talked about this, but we also found that the report really doesn't speak to the larger needs of the diversity of the population we're trying to work with, and that includes families, youth, disabled people, people who are seniors, people with fixed income. We also found that the report was deficient in that the scope of work really didn't include coming up with costing, how much it would cost to implement all of that, and that's a piece that needs to happen soon. Also, the report was very light on talking about the healthcare, behavioral health, mental health, substance abuse, and other kinds of support services that are needed. The mention of there really isn't an implementation budget attached. It doesn't really speak to the need, in addition to outreach, for ACT teams and interdisciplinary mobile teams. And then a realization that we've talked a lot about, the different funding streams and the different requirements, that in order to serve populations that we would like to serve, the person who may be $10, $20, $50 over income, we're going to need local funding or other type of funding to fill those gaps so that we can help some people who, just by virtue of whatever the criteria are, we're not able to help them. And I think there was a lot of discussion around, it's called in the TAC report phased assessment for coordinated entry. But really what that means is meeting people where they're at, doing diversion, doing prevention, having barrier busters, having stuff for people that they can use at the time that's accessible to them, where they don't get the runaround that you call this agency and that agency, and so that, the need for the coordinated system. Opportunities, so there are opportunities to create new services. There's an opportunity to get additional support from the community. And another opportunity that we wanted to point out is the increased coordination between the county, the city of Eugene, Springfield, other nonprofits, people with lived experience and business to get a broader group of people involved.
First, we found for what went right. It identified the current form of shelter we use. It engaged some partners effectively, made to conform with the state plan, which was also made by the TAC. It mentions tenancy supports. It has step-by-step for long-term solutions. It focuses on what's often downplayed, which is single individuals, and it calls for a menu of changes. What is missing? Recommendations are vague, especially, or an example is tenancy supports. We need the whole person supports. It's not an end-all. It neglects the other plans, like the strategic plan that we have, that this is supposed to be an enforcement of, not a replacement of. It's missing a lot of local input. There are unhoused groups that were not referenced in this, the people who are not sheltered along the river, on Heroin Hill, on the train tracks. We need to utilize existing opportunities to engage and get people the information they need, like outreach. They need to be able to know what's happening and how to get people to the next stop when the answer is no. Like with our faith communities, who does a lot of the work but doesn't necessarily have a lot of the information given to them about where to send people after the next steps. We need to prioritize implementation where there could be immediate impact. We need stuff now, not in 3 years, not in 5 years, not 20 years when we talk about the next report. And then we have no short-term solutions. The now is here, and we need it tomorrow and yesterday.
Not done yet.
Oh, I tried to quit early. We have a need-based emergency response. That's what we're missing. We need that. We need to pay for the amount of casework and deliver it to where people are. We aren't meeting people where they're needed. Explain different programs, like a flow chart for not just the people using it, but the practitioners. We don't know where to send people when our doors are closed. We don't know where to go when these other obstacles get in our way. And there's misinformation. We can't correct misinformation within our own organizations, much less external things, when we are so disjointed and not on the same page. We need robust services that help, again, the whole person. It's not just housing. It's not just access to healthcare. It's everything. We need hubs, access points for people to come where they are, get information or soft, warm handoffs. We need candid community conversations. We need to talk about what it's like to deal with poop in downtown. We need to talk about what it's like to move people into places where they won't get help, but it's not. I'm going to stop on that one. Separate behavior issues from lack of resources. People often put their external judgment on other people's situations. If you don't have anywhere to use the bathroom or put your trash, or if you are made to stay in a paper box, it's not necessarily squalor. You didn't choose that. It's where you are. And then we need to accept good and better practices. We don't need to just chase best practices and ignore everything up until then. We need to be able to grow and advance. And so we can't shoot down opportunities because it's not the perfect thing that Portland did. Thank you.
Hi, Ms. Travis. One thing that's majorly missing in solving the homeless problem is talking to the homeless population themselves. I am the temporary homeless advocate, and I'm homeless myself, and I'm speaking for all the homeless in Springfield, and being the voice for the homeless, talking to the homeless who is actually out there, who knows the homeless population, who knows what they have to deal with every night. How they crack down, how we can't go here, or we can't go there, or we get arrested, or get thrown in jail, or your solution is, oh, we're going to throw you in jail. You can't sleep here, or you can't sleep there. We have to talk to the homeless population themselves. The homeless, not the city, not the state. Go talk to the homeless people themselves who know what is right. And that is going to be the answer.
Thank you. Oh, good.
Thank you very much. So there is an organization that has formed kind of ad hoc with Peter Siobhan, and now it's a group of both homeless and housed people that meet every 2 weeks. We've had as many as 50 and as few as 15, and we're closer to the 50 range. The next meeting, it's called House Everyone, like, how's everyone? And that group will meet Tuesday from 4 to 5:15 at the Methodist Church, also known as the Toaster Church. And we really think that that would be a good forum to continue what you just said, sir. So any questions about that? That's an announcement. Yeah.
I just wanted to say something else.
Go ahead.
Not about what you're speaking to.
Go ahead. Oh.
I realize it's noon and our agenda calls for lunch break at noon, but I want to say while this is all very valuable, the reason that I came today was because I thought that we were going to sit down and work out action steps. And so I hope that we can spend the rest of the afternoon really sitting down and working out some real details. For example, I just had a brief conversation with Heather about how we might get some on-site counseling services at the annex and the girls' house. And so I'm really hoping that I recognize that we all have this amazing shared knowledge, and there's all these voices at the table. Everyone is heard. It's really time to start thinking about like what we can do today and tomorrow and next week and the following week. Thank you.
Richard, okay.
I'll be most quick, but this is also my forte, and Pat Farr is very familiar with my speech on this. There is a lot that needs to be done, as voiced by everybody here, but there has been some things that I'm very grateful for. Almost 2 years ago, there was no legal place to sleep. It was just get out of town. Now, there is a legal place to sleep. It is not the Hilton. It is not the best. But there's a legal place to sleep, right? Even though there's a waiting list and it sucks, at least there's a legal place to sleep. We can be grateful for there's opportunities for service providers to have answers that give hope now instead of, I'm so sorry, there's nothing we can do. There are other changes but I will take up your lunchtime. I'm telling you, there are steps that were inspired by the TAC itself that have made changes to a lot of different policy, and a lot of things have actually come to manifest. Bathrooms get more attention. All kinds of different things get more attention now than they ever have before, and it brought us all together.
Thank you, Richard. We have this, which table hasn't gone yet? Was that everybody? Oh, wow. Okay. We definitely we're ready to get into the planning. But let's have some lunch first. There was another announcement. Dan had an announcement.
One of the solutions is just 5 minutes away. Cottage Village, a project of Square One Villages of tiny homes, is under construction right now. If you'd like to see it, I'd be glad to take some folks over. It's at 1430 East Madison. I'm on a motorcycle. I'm going to head right out there. Lead anyone that wants to come and take a look. Just a 10-15 minute tour, come back and eat. What's the address again? 1430 East Madison.
So let me have your attention. So we definitely heard the request for the next part of our day to really be about action steps. We have said earlier that this room is filled with the choir who are doers. You all are chomping at the bit, ready to take action and move forward. So how do we do that? Let me provide a framework for what we've been about in terms of what I'll call community engagement, when you bring government and community and business, people with lived experience, service providers together in a community engagement process. You can think of 4 areas of work, 4 focus of that work. One of those is to inform. So if this gathering was about informing, then hopefully there would be some shared knowledge that you would have gained as a result of it. It's also, and I think in some ways when I envisioned this event with folks around the room, it was really about consulting from folks that we want to make sure we hear their voice. So there's a lot of the feedback that will be given in this next part of our conversation in terms of action steps, which will really be about consulting. You're providing feedback to folks who their job every day is to create, with policymakers and with community input, plans and action steps with measurable deliverables to achieve a goal. And we've invited you here to help us, to consult with us about what that will look like. Will that mean everything, every idea that's posited in the next afternoon is going to be implemented? I'll go out on a limb and say probably not. But at the same time, there are many ideas that will be able to move forward. And then it's our job as public administrators to help move those things forward with your feedback and interest. There's another piece also. We do this even before we got into this room. We collaborate together. We have existing work which requires all of us, and you've made commitments. Some of you have contracts with us to do this work. And finally, there's this last piece about being empowered. There's even work that happens outside of this that individuals will take and move forward with. So I offer this framework because when we've heard this morning, people say, all right, we're ready, we've talked enough, stop with the planning, let's get to work. Well, what does that mean in terms of who's walking away from this meeting with the action steps? Who's going to do the things that you all are going to require or suggest? That's a more complicated response, right? So I want you to consider, as we're talking this afternoon, in the remainder of this afternoon, that there will be several places where those action steps will land, and that there will also be opportunities for you as individuals, as organizations, and as a collective representation of our community to move these things forward. Does that help to some degree? Okay, so how are we going to do this next part? We've spent a lot of time over the last couple of days trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to get these folks together? So here is one suggestion that we're going to start with. We've identified that especially in the last day and a half, the folks around the tables have developed a sense of cohesion. Thank you. And we think we want to stay with that, but we also want to, there's this big elephant in the room and we need to take little bites out of it. So the question is, what parts of the elephant do we want to chomp on? And so here's what we're going to suggest. We've identified areas of the TAC recommendations. We have staff folks from the city and from the county who are sitting at some of the tables. And we also want to allow for an item that's not been listed up here to have some work on as well. So we'll talk about that. So what we've identified is table 1. Oh, let me say before that. So we've identified tables that folks will work on a particular issue. But if you don't like that particular issue and you're sitting at that table, get up and go to a table that works for you. Or if there's a table, say, oh, I want to be at that table, please move to that table. So table 1, where's Reagan? Reagan's going to be working on what are the action steps that we can take related to emergency shelter. And remember, we're using this framework of inform, consult, collaborate, empower, right? The second table, Amanda, can you raise your hand? Amanda's going to be working on issues related to action steps related to permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, transitional housing. Everything housing is Amanda's table. That's table 2. Table 3 is Melissa. She's going to be working with this group on outreach. Now, you may not feel like you have outreach. And some of the folks at these tables may or may not have, in your table, you may or may not have expertise on that particular issue on housing or emergency shelter. And we're going to say, that's okay in terms of our process. But if you want to be at a table where you feel like you're more of an expert, you can move. Outreach. Table 5, right in the middle. Right now, we have a blank. So we're going to let you guys figure out what are these topics you want to talk about. Table 6, where's Alex? Alex is in the back there. He's going to talk about tenancy supports. And Vanessa's table, where's Vanessa? There she is. This table is going to talk about landlord engagement. Table 8 with Danielle has coordinated entry. Table 9 with Lisa is prevention and diversion. And table 10 is in the back there with Steve. Steve might need to move to another group to talk about alternative shelter. Is there a topic that you're hearing that you would like, and we can see if folks are interested? Yes. So let's take. We're just going to go from here to the back of the room, and I need my pen. Okay. Yes, sir.
The NIMBY problem.
I'm going to just do this. Okay, so we have some interest in having talking about NIMBY. Okay, and then Chris.
Decriminalization, legal reform.
You said legal reform? Decriminalization and legal reform. Right, Chris?
Yes, sir.
And then we're moving, let me go here to this table. We'll get to you, Martha. Yes.
Discretionary fund.
Discretionary funding, so funding. I'll say funding. And discretionary funding. Okay, Martha?
Transparency and public accountability.
Transparency. 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 And public accountability. And who did I miss? Yes.
Land use restrictions against any form of cheap housing.
Land use restrictions. Okay, so this was the dilemma that your facilitators were kind of struggling with. We have the recommendations of the TAC, but we also had a sense there were going to be some things that y'all wanted to talk about. So now, where are my other facilitators? Where's Jason? Okay. So how do we do this? How do we divvy up the elephant? Go ahead, Lisa.
Why don't you go through the list that you know we have, and have people raise their hands.
Okay.
And if there is no interest in one of those groups that we're already facilitating, we can do one of these topics instead.
Okay. I have another suggestion you might want to contemplate at the same time. That when you look at the existing ones that you guys decided, maybe one of the ones you didn't cover could
So let's do this. Amanda, can you be my counter? I'll give you this. So at table 1, emergency shelter. How many folks are interested in talking about emergency shelter? Oh, that's a good question. How many times you get to vote?
I would just say however many people are interested in that thing, and then you'll see.
Okay. Okay. So how many folks are interested? But can we choose more than once?
Yeah.
Okay. How many people are interested in emergency shelter? Talking about emergency. Raise your hand. Yes.
What's the difference between alternative shelter and emergency shelter? Because sometimes emergency shelter are alternative shelters.
So you want to put those two together? Okay.
They're really different. They're really different.
They are really different. Okay. Does parking programs and camps fit for you all with emergency or with alternative shelter? Other things? Okay. I'm hearing that we want to keep them separate. Emergency shelter.
Emergency shelter is a 75-bed recommendation of the TAC report.
Yes.
Alternative shelter is rest stops.
Yes. Yes. So emergency shelter is that 75 public bed shelter that was recommended. It could be 100, whatever, but the idea is that was a TAC recommendation. So let's see a show of hands again of folks who want to talk about the TAC recommendations related to the emergency public shelter. You got that number? So Amanda's counting. Yes. Did you get the number here? There were people here. Okay. So I saw, can I see those hands again? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Okay. I was asking how many people were interested in talking about the emergency public shelter recommended through the TAC. And there were 5 individuals who raised their hand.
No, Dan's number 6.
All right, so we got 6. Now we're talking about permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, transitional housing. Raise your hand if you're interested in talking about as it was described in the TAC recommendations of sports. So,
Raise them high so you can see. Richard counts as 2.
very good. We got 10 there. The next category that TAC recommended was related to outreach. So folks are interested in talking about outreach. Mike, can you do me a favor? Can you count how many people are in the room right now? Okay. The next is related to the TAC recommendations on tenancy supports. Tenancy supports. So let's see a show of hands of folks who are interested in talking about that.
Could you put that together with landlords?
We're kind of, right now oh yeah, you're right. Tenancy supports, no, we're separate, we separated out landlord engagement. We could. Okay, so we got a show of, we had 2. How about landlord engagement? And we may put those 2 groups together, we'll see. Eight. Coordinated entry is our next group. There's 5 folks there. Prevention and diversion. And the last related to the, well, this was actually, wasn't on the TAC report, but it was on the map. Alternative shelter. Okay, 11. One of the things that we recommend is that any group that gets together, they should probably have a critical mass of at least, what do we say, Jason? 5 or 6, 4 or 5 at least? Okay. Let's go to the other list over here. So, folks who want to talk about NIMBY. I don't want to talk about that here. I'm kidding. Did you get it? How many? See your hands again. Okay. 6, we counted. Show your hands again. Raise them high if you. 6. Okay. Land use restrictions. Richard wants to be on every group. How are you gonna parse yourself? That's good. That's all right. It's all right. I'll bet. Decriminalization. Yeah. Decriminalization and legal reform. How many folks are interested in having that conversation, coming up with some planning action steps? Funding and discretionary funding. Transparency and public accountability. I don't want to talk about transparency either. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I think we should start with the largest groups here. What do you? Oh, we got land use. Yeah. Did you want to raise your hand for that? Yeah. So add one more 5. Is somebody missing that they didn't get to? Okay. So it looks like we have alternative shelter has 11, prevention has 9, landlord engagements has 8, and outreach has 9. 1, 2. Who does the math real quick in that? Oh, let's see.
So, and number 2, 11, 10, 9, 9.
Oh, okay. And does that get us there? We have a total of 48 people here, right? So we could have.
6 or 7.
Yeah, they did motivate. But it shows where the interest is, right? So. The 8 and above. All right, so where does that end us up with? So that ends us with, oh, and we also have decriminalization with 8. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to circle the ones at 8 and more. Can you circle the ones with 8 and more? So I'm seeing 6 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups. I think we probably need a couple more. Reagan? I think you're ready.
Okay, I'm going to ask others at my table to chime in with things that I missed. We had a pretty robust discussion, but that I think reveals the difficulty of talking about how an emergency shelter should work, and also reveals the need for more beyond 75 beds. So I think one of the themes, though, that was clear, that there was clear support for, is a scattered site model. Even 75 beds may be too many to put in one location. And the importance of having a coordinated system with a central referral place. So a central referral facility that may also serve as a 75 bed or less shelter, but that refers out to those other scattered sites in the community that can support certain subpopulations like youth or seniors, but also low barrier beds out in the community. It helps with management. It helps with providing sufficient services for the individuals who are there. We talked a lot about a lot of work that's going to have to be done around mitigating or just addressing some of the impacts to wherever people are going for low barrier shelter. That's just going to be a big logistical piece to figure out. The need for, and this is related to that, for a legal camping area for those who aren't going to get a bed. And then a support for being incremental with this, that there's ways to, what I took from it is we don't have to have all of these pieces figured out before doing something. Let's get something open. It might be that central referral area that could also serve as a warming shelter for cold weather, but that's starting to really coordinate the services or coordinate the shelter system so that folks can come and may get referred to the mission or may get referred to a scattered site or opportunity village or rest stop. But the need for a really coordinated shelter system is going to be integral to this, and just general support for that hub and spoke model.
Is that? Also, we talked about if like we were to put up a sprung shelter somewhere, how it could also operate on really drastic weather days and nights as a 24-hour location just during the coldest weather. So sort of like an Egan Warming Center, but that's already there, you know, for people who are really low barrier, right? They have all these issues, but it's freezing outside. And so then they could come there temporarily, at least, for some relief when it's really cold outside. So.
Did that seem okay, accurate?
I also think that we need medical beds out there for people who are being exited from our institutions, hospitals, mental health facilities, and who need a safe place to recover, take their medication, get their wound care taken care of. That's not the streets. Because a person who may be coming from a hospital may still have substance abuse and mental health issues, and if they can't access traditional shelters or a low barrier shelter, needs a place to recover and heal. And I think that's something our community desperately needs. And I know Chris over there would agree with me 100%. Let's just take it to the next table. You have go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, thank you, Tim, for allowing me. Mike's now gone. These were all Mike's ideas. I'm just kidding. And now he's conveniently left when we're presenting. Okay. All right. Sorry if people are behind me. So we had the PSH, Rapid Rehousing, Permanent Supportive Housing, and Rapid Rehousing group. I feel like I'm going to run into this. And we talked a lot about, let's see, one, we talked a lot. One was having standard models around permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. Right now, a lot of them operate very differently and have different models of that service. And that's something that we can really do very soon and very easily, and something I've assigned myself already to do by next year. And then we also talked about having standardized caseloads and a more standard of connecting supportive services, both within programs and across programs, and making sure that we're connecting to broader things like TANF and DHS, and making sure that we're better utilizing ServicePoint and HMIS to do some of that work in a more automated way, so that programs are able to talk to each other a little bit better within those. We also had some really interesting ideas about, we acknowledge that we need to have more housing, obviously, to make some of these more successful, but we talked a lot about working with landlords. And we talked about some innovative ideas about maybe if we provide funding to improve existing units, particularly in rural areas. A lot of those units can't be used for these programs because they won't meet an inspection requirement. So if we could provide incentive and fix up units, and then with the agreement that they would use that unit for a program for at least a certain amount of time, that could be a good incentive, and more units that we already have that we don't need to build. What else did we talk about? We talked a lot about landlord incentives because we have vouchers and money available that we can't spend, that we can't use, because we don't have landlords and they won't use their units for our programs. And having units that are accessible for ADA and people with disabilities. So sometimes you find a unit, but it's on the third floor and someone can't access it. So making sure that we have money available to change units to make them more accessible. What else? Did I forget anything that you want to share? I think that's it. We had a lot.
Okay, we did outreach. So we came up with first to establish some leadership around outreach. which would include funder advocacy and MOUs between agencies to be able to talk with each other. Identify who currently is doing outreach and what is their mandate. Create a job description for outreach workers. There was something else. Oh, and also do a gap analysis. Ongoing training and current training for all outreach workers together. So have them be the skilled professionals, with all of them having one common outcome being housing. Technology, so make sure everybody has a laptop or a iPad along with supplies, so needles, water, any kind of supplies that they need. And then the third thing the third little clump we put together is working with outreach partners and do tiered outreach, so have more of an informal outreach, like work with like Burrito Brigade or peer workers to do like that first touch of outreach, and then do a warm handoff to more of a skilled professional in outreach. So anything else to add? No?
Can you walk us over to the next one?
You're so talented.
I'm trying really hard, Richard. We have diversion and prevention, so we broke them up. Prevention being people who are housed but at imminent risk of losing their housing. Diversion, people who first enter the homeless system and trying to divert so they do have to enter, but get them back into a resource such as family, friends, or other things. For prevention, first of all, we need more prevention dollars. There's just not enough. We need to prioritize prevention. Right now, we have one fund that is very restrictive on prevention, about who can be in the program, less than 30% area median income. We want to be able to use funds that allow us to serve people up to 80 or maybe even more of the income, so they don't become homeless. And also, one of the problems is that the fair market rent cap that the programs can only provide resources to households that are in a unit that has kind of a low rent cost that maybe doesn't even exist. No, it must somewhere, right? To request the waiver so we can serve households that in units that are above fair market rental. We need to be really clear on what the definition of prevention services is, and we need to make sure that we communicate that with the public. So having a popular education program from kindergarten through adulthood, so the community knows not just this resource, but what are the resources, what is the map, where are the doors that people get these. And also increasing just those one-time funds, where somebody just needs one rent payment, one part of a move-in cost, one utility payment to stay in that unit. So that's, we did say prioritize prevention in the budget as the #1 item. That is actually our only prioritization because we ran out of time. For diversion, we need to develop a program immediately. So that would be, should be in place. That would be a big part of it. A flow chart for the community to understand where to go. And also integrate all the similar programs. EPD has a program that has some money to help people out. There are different little small bits of funds that keep people from entering the home or becoming homeless, or once they're homeless, getting them from entering the system deeply. Organize, not just when you divert people, we think about diverting to the natural safety nets of family and friends. So for example, if someone comes to the mission, they say, I just became homeless today, the mission hands off to a diversion specialist who says, do you have friends or family where you could stay instead of staying in an emergency shelter? Maybe we can pay part of the rent, or maybe we can pay some food for you to stay there, one of those kinds of supports. Well, what about an organized community hosting system where community members want to host a family who could avoid being in the homeless system? So integrate that kind of a program as an opportunity. And also, Airbnb have an incentive for them to house people on a short period of time so they don't, until they can get their feet underneath them and find a rental or maybe get back with family or friends. Overall, not just about diversion prevention, but 3 important things: networking, continue all this networking, transparent system and outcomes, sharing the key performance indicators so investors and donors will be incentivized to contribute to these types of projects. So we're not just looking at government funds like we think traditionally, but also having opportunities for even small donors to invest or to want to contribute to these kind of activities. And bring back Project Homeless Connect to have a big roadmap for everybody and all eyes on the homeless system so we can continue to educate the community.
Hello, we had a landlord engagement. So what we came up with is a whole laundry list of things, but we're going to stick to some of the highlights here. We want to hire a landlord liaison or engagement team that operates independent of any agencies. We also want to do, I'm going to jump out of order here. We want this landlord engagement team to be able to recruit landlords, educate landlords, all of those sort of things on behalf of all the agencies that are pulling from that centralized wait list. We also want to dive into landlord incentives in the area. We had a whole laundry list of ideas for that as well, so really diving into that. Community marketing, landlord success story marketing, so we can show landlords in the community that are really stepping up to the plate. We think that will bode well in the long run for other landlords, saying, hey, this property management company is doing something, maybe we should do something so we can get our name out there as well. Miss anything yet? That's all for now.
All right, over in the back corner, we were talking about NIMBYism, how to turn a NIMBY, not in my backyard, to a YIMBY, yes, in my backyard, or at least helping NIMBYs be nimble. So we talked about 2 ways to address NIMBYs. One would be persuasion, change of heart, and another would be, this one didn't have a lot of support from the group, but that was a political process overruled, so figuring out how we can have the right to do what we want without a public process and avoid it altogether. And then we spent the majority of our time not talking about that because that's unrealistic, but talking about NIMBYs, and here's what we can do. We can have a consistent campaign that's sustainable, where we use people, use them in a way in which they are comfortable. So for example, there are some people in our group who are like, they're comfortable canvassing and talking to your neighbors, and we thought that it needed to be neighborhood outreach, one-to-one, start small and build from there, because change is very hard, so we have to make change feel safe and build up to it. With people who have been NIMBYs themselves, with people who are housed and unhoused, but not revealing that you have experience of being unhoused, or that some of the services we're talking about, like, oh, actually, I would use that, things like that, but you don't reveal it until you're in a safe space. We would want to incentivize people that any sort of community work we're doing, it helps everybody, and help with a positive message, always being positive. We talked a lot about like a gentle approach, analyzing our audience, who are people who could be converted to our side, and focus on those people and just getting them on our side. As well as storytelling about success. There are successes in our community, such as Nightingale-hosted shelters, Whitaker safe spots. Bring people who have had success to share that, and always keep it positive. I think we had that experience even in this room, where if we're always talking about the negative, we can get into a state of despair, and that's not fun, and nobody wants to be a part of that. So keeping it positive with a consistent campaign.
We had alternative shelter, and that we defined that kind of decriminalized spaces where people can sleep safely. And we wanted to identify alternatives we don't have right now. So we have lots of ideas, and then we had one that we really got into a little bit more detail about. So ideas are this. One is RVs, et cetera. Some of these are specific to Springfield. I think this one is, not Springfield, excuse me, Eugene. Number one is RVs, et cetera, in backyards. That could be beyond Eugene. Number two, designated safe spots with paid camp leaders. That one is specifically Eugene, and we'll talk more about that. Number three, use park properties for safe space camping or sleeping. Number four, more day shelter options, especially in Springfield. Number five, have county commissioners agree to use the fairgrounds for shelter options. Number six, Leviticus project. This is Eugene, having ADUs more incentivized in Eugene, which we already have in Springfield. Just a little plug. Number seven, adding more safe parking spaces at Lane County Public Works on Delta Highway. Okay. So those are the ideas. What? The one that you have on. I put it here. And then we got more detail on the one that Wayne had. He calls it sanctuary shelters. And the idea is to put one in each ward in Eugene, 10 per site, with paid self-selected leaders, with agreed upon rules, screened by, we didn't decide who. And the idea was to have counselors of each ward shepherd this in their ward. And so have the city council kind of direct themselves to do this. Is that fair, Wayne? Am I explaining it properly?
There would be a motion to the city council to adopt this proposal.
Right. The city council would adopt the proposal, but the city councilors are also the ones that are going to be shepherding it. Yeah. So anyway, that's the we talked a little bit more about some of those details, but that's all. Anything else?
Yeah.
Where's it go? Chris? Or?
Okay, our group focused on decriminalizing homelessness. So first we talked about who our audience is, and we said it's our policymakers, it's our mayor, city council, the governor, the board of county commissioners, and police advisories or police commissioners. So some ideas we talked about is passing a state law around the Homeless Bill of Rights. So examples is that local municipalities can't ticket people in public spaces and having a right to restrooms and clean water. We also talked about having a process where we can identify arrests related to homelessness and costs, and so changing how that information is collected and reported. We also talked about expanding the scope of community court in Eugene, and also creating a homeless court in Springfield and in rural areas, and then creating more safe places to be. And then we talked a little bit more in detail about restoring dignity for when people are interacting with police. And so some ideas is that building more training for police around, or law enforcement in general, around de-escalation, trauma-informed care, working with people with an emphasis on mental health or the issues around homelessness, and then creating a system to track how that's going. And then we also talked about in something I think a little more actionable now is developing a feedback mechanism for unhoused folks who feel unsafe when they're around police or any unsafe situation. So we talked about creating a hotline, or even having places in the library, a comment card where they can report that in a safe way. Chris, do you want to add anything?
We just wanted to make sure that people have a safe place to be while we wait for the TAC, for the permanent shelter, the alternative shelter, the housing, the training, the incentives. We need places for people to be and the tickets to stop while we do it, because putting people in jail and making them have adverse costs that don't actually lead to their stabilization only sets them further back. And if we're trying to get ahead, we're just passing the buck and going behind. Police officers are willing to do the training, but they aren't. If we ask them to make it for themselves, they're going to get what they have. We as a community need to make these types of things in order so we can make sure that the things that are important to the people who are being hurt the most can actually be addressed. And so that's why we picked decriminalization with a feedback forum. We wanted to focus on the local because a lot of stuff doesn't trickle down. So.
Is there another table?
That's everybody, right? That's a lot. Wow. So, what's our next step? The next step, you're looking at the next step all around you, right? Although we can each walk away, and I actually have a good sense of where I'm headed with this, but I'd also like to hear from you all. But before we do that, I want to acknowledge that none of this work is going to happen in isolation, and it's not going to be because of one single person. It's because as a community, as individuals, as organizations, we together embark on this journey. So one last thing I'll ask you to do around tables as a way to close is talk about what is one thing that you've heard either in this last section or through the last couple days that you feel like in your own sphere of influence, you have the ability to move. And it may be in that framework that we talked about before in terms of informing or consulting or collaborating or empowering. Consider what is one thing that you can take. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for a few of you to share out. Okay? Does that make sense? Can this wait till the end? We're going to have an opportunity for feedback. Okay. So around your tables, what will you be able to do? What will you be able to influence in your own sphere that can help move our action steps forward on these issues? All right, go ahead. And it doesn't. All right. To close up. Let me have your attention. I'm over on this side here. To finish off our 2 days, we're actually going to move into a circle. So everybody is on the outside of the circle. You can either stand or you can move to the outside. But I'd like us to stand or move out to a circle where we can all see each other. So you're indulging me because, as well as being a minister years ago, I was also a camp director. Yes. Okay, so there you go. So I'm going to pass this around. You can share or you can pass the takeaway that you're got from this and what you in your sphere of influence you can do. So for me, I actually have a very concrete takeaway. I'm working with my boss. Where is he? Steve. We're putting together our budget for the next fiscal cycle, and I have the charge to develop that in line with the recommendations that we all have been talking about. So in that consulting model, you have all been consulting with me in the last few days about how our role in terms of the county Department of Health and Human Services Division can do in terms of moving these recommendations forward. So know that I'm going to assemble all those notes and consider that feedback, and as much as possible incorporate your thoughts, your action steps, plans, aspirations into what will look like a budget recommendations. I'm going to go this way. And again, you can pass or you can share.
I'm grateful that I overcame my skepticism to even show up. And I feel that my voice has been heard. And I would like to introduce a little bit of ceremony. If you would just move so close together that you're shoulder to shoulder, put your left hand on your heart and your right hand in the middle of the back of the person to your right. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Okay. And then let us. Okay. You got it. Say to yourself, I will be okay. We will be okay. And then to your neighbor to the right, say, I've got your back. I've got your back.
Thank you.
So I wasn't able to convince anybody about the 2,500 ideas I brought here, but what I will be able to do is keep on trying to make sure I can get one person housed in an RV in my backyard this winter.
I think for me, what I want to take away from this is kind of the sense of urgency that homelessness has in my community, and just kind of bring that issue to the forefront of our community, and kind of just make sure that people are aware that homelessness is a huge issue. So that's what I kind of want to take away from this.
One thing I can do is just share the good news about what is working and spread that as far as wide as possible, so that people in the greater community can see programs that are working and build on those and feel good about that.
I'm extremely grateful for so many community partners and for the community feel of this, and I take that away with me, new energy and commitment to this because there are so many, and because I feel like others have my back. And I was very tempted to start singing Kumbaya after, Bob introduced that, and even more so after David, but I won't, anyway. Yeah, I went to camp too.
Well, I'm a preacher's kid, so I know that song as well. But I take away from this that it really feels empowering and enlightening to look around at everybody coming from very different perspectives, but pretty much the unified voices that we want solutions and we want to work together. And I think that we can pull together, and we don't necessarily have to go through agencies. There are grassroots movements, and connecting the dots is getting easier the more people that you get to know. So that's what I'm taking away.
I'm taking away that collaborate piece for me in my role, and I'm constantly amazed with the skills and the strengths that are in this community. So being able to collaborate on that piece and also structure it, because there's you can kind of go a million different ways. So kind of being focused in it and listening and communicating is my goal.
I will second the collaboration piece. As part of Live Healthy Lane, I look forward to these continued conversations and also just seeing where we can advocate and make motion moving forward. Thank you for providing this space for us these last 2 days.
I'm going to bring some news to you folks. Community Supported Shelters. I'm board president. We are establishing a new rest stop, safe spot, on West 11th across from St. Vinny's between Grant and Hayes. I'm going to be working to raise another $50,000 to make it happen, but we have 4 major donors that did make it happen. We bought the property, and Emily can now brag that it's in her district.
Yes, in my backyard. I'm still really frustrated. I'm still gonna work hard, and I know you're all frustrated too, and that doesn't make it better, but it gives us something in common. And it's from this connection that we will make some change tomorrow. Thank you very much. And when it feels really lonely, I'm going to remember all of you. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I made some great connections this weekend, and we'll keep in contact, and we'll move forward with those. I will move forward with those connections as well.
They say a journey begins with a single step, but we all just took 50 steps here, and I think that's what we need to bring. More steps, more positivity.
I'll be taking just a lot of appreciation for being with so many people who care and commit and have a lot of persistence and passion for this. So thank you all.
Yeah, mine's really similar, just taking away the energy of all of you in the room, all of your passion and all of your ideas, and trying to do something with all that rather than just sort of the talking piece, right? So I take away the sense of urgency that all of you have and trying to bring that sense of urgency more to the work that we do.
I'm going to volunteer for working with the county on budgeting and funding and creative funding sources between collaborations with business to contribute part of the funding to fund the tech and much, much more to help the homeless. I'm going to volunteer on the funding side.
Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate different perspectives. So I wear two hats in this room. I'm a provider, so I run the agency here in Cottage Grove, and I'm also a city councilor. And I know how painfully slow government moves. I can't tell you, it can be awful, and I appreciate you coming and sticking with it regardless. Because in the end, we're all here to support all of those in our community, and I applaud all of you for that. So thank you so much. And just keep sticking with it, which is exactly what I'm going to do. Thank you.
I'm going to take I felt frustrated most of the time here, but I'm going to take that energy and take that frustration into tangible things that we can do in TAC implementation that I have control over, and then just continue listening to people.
I'm encouraged by some of the ideas that we have discussed today, some of the collaboration of the outreach workers that we envision, and I plan to share the information that we've discussed today with other people.
I found the last discussion group to be rather invigorating. Lots of good ideas. I was searching for action and have a greater sense of something I can actually do. So.
I'm committing to, within my work at the county, building up our program's capacity to make sure we can do this work as much as I can, and making sure that we're setting standards that will help us move forward, because that's something I have control over. And then secondly, I'm committing to making sure the voice of people with lived experience is heard within the county, and I'm happy to be that avenue for that to be heard in my work and share that within the county as well. So I'm committing to that.
I'm committing to be a better and more active or proactive partner and collaborator in this community. And my biggest takeaway is I've just been incredibly humbled and inspired and just really excited to be working in this community with so many awesome people.
I just want to express appreciation for the participation of all the unhoused and underhoused people who've been with us, and all the people with lived experience as well. And thanks to the county for allowing that part of our community to be part of this.
I appreciate just knowing how big my team really is, because usually it feels like just those folks I show up to work with, and now I know it's really all of you guys.
It's going on almost 2 years since I've been housed, and then when I was out there for over a decade, there was nothing more than a handful of people could do nothing more than feel sorry for me and my poor plight. Look at all these people here. We are going to accomplish something great. I can tell that this is all really not just words, so I am so encouraged, so grateful. None of this was happening 2 years ago. So look how far we've come. Give yourselves a hand, not me.
just want to say thank you.
I also want to say thank you, and I think a lot of the variety of voices that I've heard over these last 2 days will continue to resonate with me, so I appreciate the opportunity to listen to all of them.
Thanks for everybody for showing up. I am going to do everything in my power to move forward on ensuring folks with barriers to housing have access to incentives for landlords to get into the housing.
I'm exhausted. I pass.
I just appreciate all the voices in the room, and I'm going to take back some of those individual conversations and make sure they're heard back at the county.
My takeaway is to keep the business community involved in this conversation.
I want to thank you all for being here, and I feel like we have many, many more allies that I better understand, and I'm going to take what I've learned here and heard from you all back to the county.
Thankful for the many voices and the deep listening.
In my job, there are days when I feel completely overwhelmed, and even though I have great support above me, there's sometimes when I just go home thinking I didn't accomplish a damn thing today. But with all of this, everybody else in here, I think now I'll feel a little less overwhelmed.
I'm thankful for everybody who has lived experience for being brave, being here, and sharing your voice. To echo what Majestica said, as the chair of League, I want to be able to help harness that voice so that we are not ignored. When the Camp 99 shows again, if something like that happens, that we look to our people who are there, who know what we need, and that we share those. I'm extremely grateful for the fact that people have challenged some of their views from our community and checked their experience when they've talked to some of our lived experience people, and we need to keep on having those conversations, keep asking the challenging questions, and keep answering back.
I want to thank everybody for coming, and I also want to say that, in the work that we do with Lane County and our housing programs, that I'll just remember that everybody here is an ally, and I'm hoping that this will be a step so that we can step it up.
I am going to leave here today with more connections that I came with to be able to continue to house our homeless and maintain their housing after they are put into housing.
I am just grateful for the family that is in this room, and that we're all on the same team and we all have the same goals. And I'm also going to leave here with the action items that others have committed me to.
So well put.
I'm grateful to be here, and we'll continue to work in Springfield on these issues.
I'm going to use the bully mic for just a second. Bob and Steve, if you could somehow manage to sit down with Peter and Becky, or whoever that person would be, and draw up a really detailed 3-year timeline that you can, of course, change when things don't quite work out, move it back a month, but something so detailed that we really have, all of us have a blueprint to work with.
I'm just grateful all these people are speaking for the homeless population. It's about time that people speak for the unhoused and the unvoiced people in our community. They need a voice too, and it warms my heart that this many people care about the homeless, that soon, hopefully one day, not one homeless people can die out in the cold. That is our eventual goal, and hopefully one day we can get there.
At lunch, I was sharing an anecdote I heard once, and I don't know if it's true or not, but Mother Teresa was asked if she would participate in an anti-war march, and she declined and said, but if you organize a pro-peace rally, I'll participate in that. And it made me think of an interview I heard with one of the early pioneers of Housing First, and he commented that the goal with his model wasn't to end homelessness, it was recovery. And I think that's really what I want to commit to, is recovery of individuals who are unhoused or marginalized or disenfranchised and get them back into the community with dignity, in a space where they can provide for themselves and for others. And that starts with supporting my own recovery and then working with men that I sponsor, and then from there participating in organizations that are ultimately aimed at recovery.
Go ahead, Todd. Yeah, I had to come here and say, I learned a lot about the scope and the range and the depth of many people's work here that I didn't know before, and also your degree of collaboration with each other. And that's really what I came here, was just to edify myself and learn, and I was richly rewarded. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Go home, rest, enjoy your weekend. Let's get together again. See each other out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.